Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my Fire and Ice Hibiscus. This tree started out life as a cutting that Connor gave me, and it's slowly developing into a bonsai. This tree is very young, but I'm going to slowly and carefully grow it into a nice bonsai. So today I'm going to be defoliating the tree, pruning up the structure, and repotting it. My hibiscus has had a cool period, which they like, and after today I'm going to bring it into the plant room and warm it up and get it growing once again. I'll begin today by removing all the leaves. That'll give me a good look at the structure of the tree, so then I can prune it up. I've got the tree defoliated now. The last time I worked on the tree, I chose this as the front. I marked it with some wire, and that may change after today's pruning. I'm looking at the structure of the tree now. So it comes up, the main trunk line comes forward, which is nice, to the apex, and then I have this branch off to the side here, and it's quite thick. It's too thick to be a branch compared to the trunk size, but it could be another upright trunk. If you have thick branches like this, you've either got to prune them off or turn them into, a multi-trunk tree. So I've got to decide, do I want to keep that thick branch on there, or do I want to get rid of it? You can see on the trunk here where I have removed several large branches in the past, and they're healing over quite nicely. So it's a tough decision. This branch doesn't really flow upwards very well. It's a little too kind of horizontal to be an upright trunk, unless, I redirect it up. I do have another thinner branch below that I could, cut the thick one off and develop the thinner one. It's a tough decision. I mean, sometime on the tree you do have to divide it into branches. And I'm thinking, what am I thinking? My initial thought is to get rid of it. But, it's a well-developed branch. It has a lot of movement, taper. I would hate to cut it off, but I've got to decide what's better for the future of the tree. So the trunk on the tree isn't very thick. Compared to the height of the tree, it's a little skinny looking. So if I do keep this side of it and develop it into a branch or a trunk, it would contribute to thickening up the main trunk on the tree. It's a tough decision. I think there's a branch out the back here that's going a very funny direction. I'm going to get rid of that one. Doesn't really help me with my decision, but this branch doesn't really have a good flow. You can see the one here is more upright. It flows from the trunk upwards better. This one, as I said, it's a little too horizontal, I think. And it's very thick. And I think I'm better to develop my multi-trunks up higher in the tree. I think it would make a more elegant tree without this. Also makes it look taller. It's a tough decision. I mean, either way would be acceptable. I do have that branch here that I could replace it with. It's a thinner branch coming off the trunk. I think that's my best option, to keep my branches thin and it makes the trunk look powerful. This branch here is, almost the same thickness as the trunk, which isn't so good. And it doesn't really flow upwards very well. It's a little too horizontal to be a trunk line. I think I'm going to get rid of it. So I've given that a lot of thought, this thick branch here, and I've decided to remove it and try and keep this thinner one below. So I will rough cut it off first. Let me get my close-up glasses on so I can see this properly, because I don't want to injure this branch that's below. So I will come in and try and get as close as I can to the trunk line. Right about here, I think. So here I go, big cut coming up. I've got to make sure I don't hit that branch. Here I go. Okay, so that branch is off. Wow, big cut. So I'll come in and clean that up now. Wow, that's pretty close there. Don't think I can do much better than that. And I will seal that cut with some rubber cement. And hopefully that lower branch will stay alive. It should. There I go. So let's have a look at the styling of the tree now. So I'm going back to the front of the pot, which isn't too bad. It's got some nice movement. Here it's kind of more C-shaped. The back, it goes away from you. So I think the front of the pot is a good front now. I do have a branch coming straight out the front here that I'll snip off. Like that. And then the one coming out here, I want to prune the tip off to encourage it to fan out. So coming up the trunk line, I have a branch here, which is kind of on the inside of a curve. It's not too bad. I'll snip it off shorter. And do I keep it? No, I think I get rid of it. So that's gone. So my trunk line comes up, it divides here. I've got a third branch on the inside here. I'll remove that. And then if this is the front, I've got duplicate branches here. I could rotate the front to something like this and keep both, but again, I think this one's getting too thick compared to the trunk line, so I'm going to remove it. Like that. So that is removed. And then I think it's just a matter of pruning these branches back. So I'm looking for leaves that fan outwards. There's one here and one here. I'll snip it off here. Keep it a little long, and then this one I'll snip off here, and the back one I'll snip off here, keeping them a little longer than I intended to. This one I'll snip off here, and then I have a third branch at the back. I'll take that little one out, really cleaning up that structure. Now this branch on the inside here, again, it's kind of on the inside of a curve. I don't think I need this one, so that one will come off also. So I'm, left with basically almost a stick again, but that's what I'm doing. I'm developing the trunk line, and the branches will come later. So next, I want to repot it and get the root system, on track also. So First I'll remove my layer of moss. So you can see the moss is climbing up the trunk of the tree here too. Now I have to put something under this pot because it rocks slightly and it's kind of driving me crazy. So I will fold up a piece of paper and stick it under the 1 foot so it doesn't rock anymore. There. That's a little better. Yeah, so I'll just peel all this moss off. I don't need it on the surface. So I watered this tree quite heavily this morning, and I can see the soil underneath is very dry. So I think the water was kind of running off the moss more than getting into the pot. It's moist around the edges of the pot, but not. I'll take my previous front marker out because I think the front has changed on the tree. Yeah, water got in some areas, but not over here. Hey, now it's rocking the other direction. Oh my goodness, I need another piece of paper. Hold on. Put the one under this foot and the other one under this foot. There. Oh, it's still rocking. I need thicker on this end. There. No more rocking of the pot. When a tree's young, I tend to repot them more frequently because you're trying to develop the radial root system. As they get older, the surface roots get set, and it's not so critical that you're working on the roots. And I'm not repotting it for health reasons. I'm repotting it to get the roots in order, to get that nice radial root base at the base of the tree. Okay, so next I'll get the tree out of the pot. Okay, I'm going to remove the tree from the pot. Look at that, wow. It's quite root bound, which is good. So next I'll start raking out the roots. And I will be, tearing through some of these finer crossing roots, but I'll be keeping the radial roots intact. Wow, I can't believe how dry this soil is. I really watered it like 4 or 5 times to make sure it was thoroughly watered because it had been down in the basement and I thought, oh, it must be kind of drying out a bit. It's been down there a while. So I gave it a really good watering, and obviously it was not a really good watering because this soil is very, very dry. So I'm seeing lots of good radial roots, but there's also a lot of thick roots that have developed. And this is typical when a tree's young. You get sort of an imbalanced root system. And it takes a lot of work to get a nice surface root spread that's even and radial. And then once, as I said, once you get that root spread developed, the nice radial roots, then that's the time to start potting the tree up and growing it larger if you want to grow it larger. You don't want to grow it larger if you have a bad looking root system, because those bad looking roots will just get worse. They'll get thicker and harder to correct. So that's why a lot of my trees start off in small pots and they slowly get potted up, because it keeps the root system under control, so you get a nice, well-developed radial root base, not one that's got really thick roots and is out of balance. And yeah, so some pockets of the soil got watered well, but others did not. So the drainage screens were quite deep under the roots, so it was pushing the tree out of the pot. It was so root bound. But today I will correct that. I'll get it back to a smaller root system and develop the roots that are good. Okay, so you can see I've got this mass of roots on the bottom that I won't be using, but I've got all my radial roots up top, so I can start cutting the root base. All right, here I go with the roots. So I've got one that's hit the edge of the pot here, so I will trim it off shorter, pull that root out. There's some growing down here. There's a long one here. Snip that off. There's a really thick root here that wraps back in towards the center of the tree. So I'm going to prune it off short here, like that. There's one hanging down here. I'll prune it off here. And I'm getting close to being able to remove that lower root mass. There it goes. So all that can be discarded. So now I'm looking at the roots. I've got one that sticks up too high here, so I'll snip that off. There's one here that just broke off. A few fine roots here that aren't in a good position, so I'll prune those away. Coming around, and you can see all the roots in this area. There is a lot here. I think I need to go down below. Let me rake this out. So you want your root base flat on the bottom, and then on the top it's got to go from the trunk and taper down into the soil. You don't want your roots horizontal, otherwise you can't slowly raise the tree in the pot because the roots would be out of the soil. So always have your surface roots tapering down into the soil. That way, as the tree gets larger, you can keep raising it up, exposing those roots. Okay, so on the bottom here, I have got one pointing straight down that I'll remove entirely. Another one here. More here. Here. So I just want to thicken up my radial roots, not the ones pointing straight down. A thick one comes off. This one's going a funny angle, so I'll prune it off really short. I'll give these ones a trim on the bottom. This one's too low. That's got the bottom quite flat. I'm just trimming all these fine roots back like that, so it's nice and flat on the bottom now. You can see the tree stands up by itself. So let me clean up and then we'll come in and do a detailed root pruning of what's left. Okay, let's look at the roots. So this one here is going a funny direction. It's not radial. This one's still sticking up too high. Snip that off. This one's sticking up here, here. This one, this root here, this is the radial direction, and it's cranked over. And it comes up from way down here. So it needs to be removed. It's just not a good root origin or direction. This one's not too bad, it's nice and radial. There's one beside it that's Okay, this one here is coming from too low in the root base, so this thick one can be removed. And I'll need to find the origin of it. Looks like it comes from in here. So I'll prune it back very short. And then this one, you can see the radial directions here, and it's cranked way over. So I will remove that part of it, like that. Here's a root that comes up and then curls back into the root base, so I need to untangle it, like that. And I think it's okay. I can position it in the soil. I will shorten it though. Actually, I'll shorten it back so it doesn't curl back in on itself. Here's another root that's going a funny direction. I'll see if I can untangle it. No, it doesn't want to stay, so I'll prune it off short. I'll get more fine roots coming from that cut point, and one of them should be radial. Okay, so over here I have a really thick root. I'm going to trim off the upper root there. There's another one sticking up here. So the radial direction's here. It's getting a bit off, so I'm going to prune it back to here, like that, keeping the root going in a radial direction, which is here. It's good now. I have an extension out here. I'm not so sure about this root. It's okay. It's a good location. I'll just trim it back a little shorter. This root's a little high, but I think I can direct it down into the soil. This root kind of comes off at a strange angle. I'll just prune that back a bit shorter too. I think that's pretty good for the root base. I will give it a slight trim around the edges just to get it a little more compact. Like that. Let's trim these bottom ones a bit more. And I think that is good. I think that's as much as I can do to that root base today. And it's looking good. It's developing nicely. I picked the front of the pot. This is the nicer side. If I go to the back side here, I've got some lumpy drips in the glaze. Bit of bare patches there. So this is the nicer side. So I'll put my drainage screens back in the bottom of the pot and fill it with a base layer of soil. Okay, in goes the soil. And I'll fill it up about maybe half full. I'll mound it up in the middle, and then I'll position the tree. Okay, so the front of the tree was to be about here. I'm kind of, it kind of, from the side view, it arches. I don't want it going kind of backwards and then straight up, so I want it pretty well how it was, I guess. And as far as the position in the pot, for now, I'll put it in the middle, or just slightly offset. And I'm getting my height so the root base is about the right level in the pot, which is about here. That's looking good. From the side view, I think that's pretty good. So next, I'll make sure I get my roots positioned. They're not too bad. Okay, so I'll add some soil now. And then I'll lift the tree up slightly so the roots aren't horizontal, so they go down a bit. Like that. Just roots of pine bark there. And I'll fill in the remainder of the soil now. Building it up a little bit around the tree. You can always rake that away later to expose the root base. So that soil is a pretty good level in the pot. Here's a look at the tree in the pot. I think it looks good. I think it'll develop into something nice eventually. It's off to a good start. It's got the roots sorted out. It's got the branches sorted out. It's got a nice trunk line. And it's starting to develop a canopy up top. I'll give the tree a good watering now. So here I go. Now it's flowing through the soil really, really nicely. Okay. My message for this video is don't expect your tree, if you just leave it in a pot and let it grow and grow, to become a really good bonsai. You need to sort those roots out. You need to always be looking at the branch structure, planning for the future. The solution is not always just stick it in a big pot and let it grow, because all the defects will grow also. So I find, all this management when the tree's a small stick pays off once it starts developing branches and a canopy. You get those beautiful roots that you can expose. You get a nice trunk line. Your branches don't have major flaws in them, crossing branches and awkward looking branches or branches that are too thick. So managing your trees from small and keeping the work going as they get larger and larger, and in the end you get something really awesome. My Sarissa was developed the same way, from a little tiny cutting. I managed it every time I repotted it, and I kept up on the branches, and it's developing into something quite nice. So the same will go for this tree. Eventually, it'll start getting structure and branches, and it'll have the nice root system. So yeah, don't just stick your small trees in a large pot and let them grow and expect to get a really high quality bonsai. You've got to do all the work, all those steps in between growing the tree from small to something larger. I've placed a couple of stones on top of the soil just to hold the tree in place until those roots get established. So that is all the work on my Fire and Ice Hibiscus for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.